Your Majesty at your service. Welcome to Fair Queen Talks. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of my podcast, Black Motherhood. The Black experience of motherhood is not singular. Neither is it exclusive to women with African ancestry. Nevertheless, going into motherhood as a Black woman will expose you to how racism and sexism can manifest itself, whether it be through perception, stereotypes, statistics, medicine. The experience of being or becoming a Black mother is where you will unpack the complexity of Blackness, femininity, and fertility. In today's episode, I'll be sharing my experience thus far of Black motherhood. My goal with this episode is to leave you more informed and more aware about how overt, covert, and systematic racism functions. Racism, or racial discrimination, is shown by behavior that may be overt, which means direct, or covert, indirect, in nature. There are also instances where organizations or governments put into place systems that discriminate against people or particular race and ethnic groups, and this is called systematic or institutional racism. The journey to motherhood does not start at birth, and therefore I want to start exploring Black motherhood from looking at what we know about the womb. James Marion Sims developed pioneering tools and surgical techniques related to women's reproductive health and is credited as the father of modern gynecology. The 19th century physician research was conducted on enslaved Black women without anesthesia or medical support. Sims defenders say that the Southern-born slaveholder was simply a man of his time, for whom the end justified the means, and that enslaved women with fistulas were likely to have wanted a treatment badly enough that they would have agreed to take part in his experiments. But history hasn't recorded their voices, and consent from their owners, who had a strong financial interest in their recovery, was the only legal requirement at the time. Critics say that Sims cared more about the experiments than in providing therapeutic treatment, and that he caused untold suffering by operating under the racist notion that Black people did not feel pain. They say his use of enslaved Black bodies as medical test subjects falls into a long, ethically bereft history of medical apartheid. All women who gave birth from the 19th century up to this day have all benefited from the study of the Black woman's pregnant body. As much as I live with gratitude for the medical knowledge that was brought from this research, I cannot forget the suffering and injustice done to enslaved Black women. I cannot explain the sadness that I was able to survive the pain I felt through labor because of their pain. It is for this reason I believe it is very important that the world and you today recognize how gynecology was developed. Motherhood starts with fertilization. So now I'd like to explore the idea of fertility. Aya Graydon said, "I think there is a deep cultural undercurrent fueled by racism and false perception of what it means to be a Black woman. We have bought into ourselves as primarily breeders on some level. The Black woman as a forever fertile is a notion held over from slavery." End quote. Women of color are often seen as hyper-fertile, stereotyped as having large families and contributors to rapid population growth and crowding in inner city areas. There is a historic belief that infertility doesn't exist within the Black community. This idea has so deeply been rooted in the culture that mothers and aunties don't talk to their daughters about fertility issues. Then, when a woman does experience them, she feels too much guilt or shame to bring it up, even to a doctor. Some black women, like other women of color, blame this silence around infertility to the ideal that women are expected to be strong, even strong enough to handle reproduction struggles without showing any vulnerability. Personally, I've been diagnosed with polycystic ovary syndrome. This is a condition that affects how a woman's ovaries work. PCOS, the abbreviation for it, is one of the most common causes of female infertility, affecting an estimated 5 million women. The infertility rate with PCOS is very high, and women who have this usually will have difficulty getting pregnant and usually require treatment to improve chances for pregnancy. Some people with polycystic ovary syndrome will ovulate, which means releasing a mature egg, occasionally, and others do not ever ovulate. If you have PCOS, you have a higher risk of pregnancy complications, such as high blood pressure, hypertension, preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, and miscarriage. These risks are particularly high if you are obese. If you are overweight or obese, you can lower your risk by losing weight before trying for a baby. For all my black sisters who feel lost in their journey towards motherhood due to infertility, I want to let you know that there are many ways to become a mother, if that's what you desire, and you should equip yourself with knowledge so that you can make the right decisions about your body. This far, I've spoken about the gynecology and infertility. Now I want to explore the idea of giving birth as a black woman. When I was about to give birth, there was a study made about maternal death here in the UK. According to that study in 2019, from a group that looks at the causes of maternal deaths, stillbirths, and infant deaths, black women in Britain are 5 times more likely to die as a result of complication in pregnancy compared to white women, and the risk is increasing year on year. Without getting too deep into this study, I feared for my life when I read about this because I was a pregnant black woman with PCOS, carrying twins, and experiencing preeclampsia. I was so blessed to have a consultant who had me in her care, a shout out to Dr. Green, who knew how to look after pregnant black patients. She knew that I would react better to certain medication and that I needed to have bed rest when I did. Her interest and knowledge in knowing how to deal with minority patients is what was key to my survival and the success of the birth of my beautiful daughters. I say all this because black maternal death is appalling, and my story is not the norm. These studies should encourage all those who work with pregnant black women to take an interest of educating themselves and work towards lowering the numbers of maternal deaths in black women. The last point I want to explore is the perception of black women who are pregnant and black mothers. In my head, I had promised myself I wouldn't be a pregnant graduate because of how that appears to others. This thinking was before I unlearned ignorance within myself. So when I became pregnant in my last year of my master's degree, I had to swallow my pride and deal with a broken promise in my head. I was really nervous about showing up pregnant, not only to my graduation, but also to my lecturers who hadn't seen me with a bump. So when I showed up around 6 months pregnant to my graduation with my husband, I could feel everyone look at me, especially the parents of other graduates. I was a 27-year-old married woman, and I think I could easily pass for a graduate in her early 20s. My age or marital status did not matter. I felt that all people saw was a young black female student who did a lot more than just studying, but managed to finish the course before ruining her graduate life. No one said anything like that to me, but that's how I felt by the way I was looked at. And because some people don't always think that my husband is my husband, I also felt that they thought that I was alone. Now, that may be the story for someone else, but it wasn't mine. And to have felt such pain on that day was not a nice experience. I felt so many stereotypes and perceptions on that day, but reminded myself when I walked across that stage with my big old belly that I was not only a mother to be, but also a master's graduate with a promising career that would allow me to have a healthy balance of private and public life. The feeling of negative stereotypes of young Black mothers continued, and sometimes I still feel it when I'm out and about with my girls alone. But I don't care. For much of my life, I tried to not be the negative stereotype Black mother. But what I have learned so far is that no matter what you do, you can still be made to think that way. Entering Black motherhood is not easy. Infertility may be your situation. You may not survive giving birth, and you may suffer judgments throughout your pregnancy and motherhood. When moments get tough, I remind myself of my Black maternal ancestry and how they have gone through everything I've gone through and more. I remind myself of my faith and my self-worth. I remind myself that as much as there are negatives, there are positives. Black motherhood is diverse, and not everyone has the same story. But there is power in sharing our stories so that the next generation of Black mothers will not feel alone. Neither will they suffer in silence. At the end of each episode, I address the queendom. Gynecology was built on the back of enslaved pregnant Black women. Black motherhood is diverse. Black mothers can be empowered by their mothers and aunties, being more open about their experiences. The healthcare system has a duty of care for pregnant Black women. Stop giving value to negative perceptions, stereotypes, and thoughts about Black motherhood. Start focusing on listening to your body and enjoy your journey of motherhood. Thank you so much for listening to Fairy Queen Talks. See you next time.